Act 1. Into the Ice Kingdom. In the mid-19th century, the British Empire stood at the apex of its power. Its navy ruled the waves, its flag flew over territories spanning the globe, and its thirst for exploration, knowledge, and conquest seemed unquenchable. Yet, one great geographical prize remained elusive, a challenge that had haunted explorers for centuries: the Northwest Passage. This was the fabled sea route through the icy labyrinth of the Canadian Arctic archipelago, a potential shortcut connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. To find and navigate it would be a triumph of British skill and endurance, a final jewel in the crown of imperial exploration. In 1845, the Admiralty decided it was time to conquer this last frontier, and they assembled the most technologically advanced and lavishly equipped expedition the world had ever seen to do it. At its helm was a seasoned, if somewhat controversial, veteran of Arctic exploration, Sir John Franklin. Franklin was already a national hero, albeit a complex one. He had served in the Napoleonic Wars, fought at the Battle of Trafalgar, and had undertaken previous harrowing expeditions into the Arctic wilderness. One earlier overland journey had earned him the grim nickname, the man who ate his boots, after his party resorted to eating shoe leather to survive starvation. Now, at the age of 59, he was being given one last chance to achieve the glory that had eluded him, to finally unlock the secret of the Northwest Passage. He was given command of two magnificent warships, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror. These were not ordinary vessels. They were former bomb ships, built with incredibly thick, reinforced hulls designed to withstand the crushing pressure of Arctic ice. They were outfitted with the latest technology of the age, powerful auxiliary steam engines adapted from railway locomotives, capable of propelling the ships through calm waters or loose ice flows. They had internal steam heating systems to combat the brutal cold, and retractable screw propellers and iron rudders that could be pulled up to protect them from ice damage. Crucially, they were provisioned like floating fortresses. The ships carried enough food and supplies to last the 134 officers and men for at least 3 years. This included over 8,000 tins of preserved meats, vegetables, and soups, a relatively new technology that was supposed to guarantee fresh food in the harshest environments. They also carried vast quantities of coal, scientific instruments, a library of over 1,200 books, and even a hand organ for entertainment. It was an expedition conceived with supreme confidence, a symbol of Britain's unwavering belief in its technological superiority over the forces of nature. On May 19, 1845, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror sailed from Greenhithe, England, amidst fanfare and national pride. Their departure was a spectacle, the gleaming ships representing the pinnacle of Victorian ambition. After a final stop in the Orkney Islands, they headed west towards Greenland. In late July, near Disco Bay on the west coast of Greenland, the expedition encountered two whaling ships, the Prince of Wales and the Enterprise. Letters were exchanged. The crew seemed in high spirits, and Franklin himself was reported to be optimistic. The whalers watched as the Erebus and Terror sailed northwest towards Lancaster Sound and the heart of the Canadian Arctic. They were the last Europeans to ever see the ships or any of the 129 men aboard. 5 men were later discharged and sent home from Greenland, leaving 129 to continue. Sir John Franklin and his expedition sailed over the horizon and into the vast, white silence of the Ice Kingdom, vanishing into legend. Act 2. The Great Silence and the Search. For 2 years, there was silence. Back in England, there was initially little concern. Arctic expeditions were known to be long and arduous affairs, often lasting several years, and extended periods without communication were expected. Franklin was equipped for 3 years. Surely, he would emerge triumphant from the ice, when the time was right. But as the third winter, 1847, passed with no word, anxiety began to mount. Where was Sir John Franklin? The driving force behind the growing clamor for answers was Franklin's indomitable wife, Lady Jane Franklin. A remarkable woman of intelligence and determination, she refused to accept the Admiralty's initial complacency. She lobbied politicians, wrote letters to newspapers, consulted psychics, and offered substantial rewards from her own fortune for any information about her husband's fate. Her relentless campaigning transformed the search for the lost expedition into a national obsession. Beginning in 1848, the British Admiralty, spurred by Lady Franklin and public pressure, launched one of the largest and most sustained search and rescue operations in history. Over the next decade, dozens of ships, both British and American, sailed into the treacherous labyrinth of the Arctic archipelago. These search expeditions were epic undertakings in themselves, facing the same brutal conditions that had likely claimed Franklin. Ships became trapped in the ice, crews suffered from scurvy and starvation, and many rescuers died in the quest to find the lost explorers. The first tangible clues finally emerged in 1850. A search squadron discovered the expedition's first winter camp on Beechey Island, a small, desolate island at the entrance to Wellington Channel. Here, they found evidence of an orderly and well-established camp, stone shelters, numerous empty food tins, over 600 of them, a detail that would later become significant, discarded equipment, and most chillingly, 3 graves. The headstones marked the final resting places of Petty Officer John Torrington, Royal Marine Private William Braine, and able seaman John Hartnell. All 3 had died in the winter of 1845–46, the expedition's very first year in the Arctic. Autopsies conducted on their perfectly preserved bodies when they were exhumed in the 1980s would reveal the first hints of a sinister problem: high levels of lead in their tissues. But in 1850, the graves only deepened the mystery. Why had 3 men died so early in the expedition, when they should have been at their healthiest? And more importantly, where had the ships gone after leaving Beechey Island? For several more years, the search continued fruitlessly. Ship after ship returned empty-handed. Then, in 1854, a crucial breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. John Ray, a Scottish surgeon and explorer working for the Hudson's Bay Company, was surveying the Boothia Peninsula when he encountered a group of local Inuit hunters. The Inuit possessed several items that were unmistakably European: silver spoons and forks, a piece of gold braid, buttons, and a small silver plate engraved with Sir John Franklin. Ray patiently questioned the Inuit. They told him a horrifying story. Several winters earlier, likely in 1850, they had encountered a large group of about 40 white men, thin, starving, and dragging a heavy boat southward over the ice near the mouth of the Back River, hundreds of miles from Beechey Island. The men communicated through sign language that their ships had been crushed by the ice, and they were heading south, hoping to reach a Hudson's Bay Company outpost. Later that same season, the Inuit hunters had stumbled upon a gruesome sight on King William Island, further north. About 30 frozen corpses, some partially buried, some intense, others lying in the open. Most disturbingly, the Inuit reported clear evidence that these desperate, dying men had resorted to the ultimate taboo to survive: cannibalism. Ray purchased the artifacts and returned to England with the grim news. The Franklin expedition had met a catastrophic end. Act 3. The skeletons on King William Island. Dr. Ray's report, particularly the shocking evidence of cannibalism, caused a sensation and scandal back in Victorian England. Charles Dickens, among others, vehemently attacked Ray, refusing to believe that heroic British sailors could stoop to such barbarism, suggesting instead that the Inuit were lying or were themselves responsible for the deaths. Lady Franklin, devastated but resolute, rejected Ray's findings and funded one final, private expedition to find definitive proof of her husband's fate and, she hoped, to salvage his reputation. In 1857, the small steam yacht Fox, captained by the experienced Arctic explorer Francis Leopold McClintock, set sail. McClintock was determined to follow up on the Inuit accounts. In the spring of 1859, after being frozen in the ice for the winter, McClintock's sledge teams reached King William Island, the desolate, windswept island where the Inuit had reported finding the bodies. What they discovered there confirmed Ray's grim report and provided the first, and for over a century, the only written record of the expedition's fate. McClintock's men encountered several Inuit families who possessed more relics from the lost ships and shared further harrowing details. They spoke of one ship crushed by ice and sunk off the northwest coast of the island, and another ship that had drifted further south before eventually sinking. They described seeing white men falling down and dying as they struggled to walk south. Following the Inuit directions, McClintock's sledge parties began to uncover the horrifying truth scattered across the barren landscape. They found skeletons. One sledge party discovered a human skeleton lying face down on the gravel beach, alone, hundreds of miles from where the ships were believed to be trapped. Another party found the expedition's large, heavy lifeboat mounted on a massive sledge. Inside the boat were two more skeletons, along with loaded shotguns, watches, silver cutlery, books including the Vicar of Wakefield, and an astonishing amount of other heavy, useless items. Why were these starving men dragging such a burden across the ice? The most crucial discovery was made at a place called Victory Point on the northwest coast of King William Island. There, under a cairn of stones, McClintock found a small, standard Admiralty form left by Franklin's second-in-command, Captain Francis Crozier and Lieutenant Graham Gore. The document contained two messages, written a year apart. The first note, dated May 28, 1847, was optimistic. It stated that the Erebus and Terror had wintered in the ice near Beechy Island in 1845–46, then sailed south through the Peel and Franklin Straits, becoming trapped in the ice again off the northwest coast of King William Island in September 1846. It reported, Sir John Franklin commanding the expedition. All well. But written around the margins of this same note was a second, far more desperate message, dated April 25, 1848. It reported that the ships had now been trapped in the ice for a year and a half. Sir John Franklin had died on June 11, 1847, just 2 weeks after the first optimistic note was penned. The total death toll, including Franklin, had reached 9 officers and 15 men. The remaining 105 survivors, now under the command of Captain Crozier, had abandoned the ice-locked ships on April 22, 1848. Their intention, the note stated, was to start walking south towards the Back River on the Canadian mainland. This single document provided the framework of the disaster. The ships were trapped, Franklin died, and the survivors made a desperate, doomed attempt to walk to safety. McClintock's discoveries confirmed the broad strokes of the Inuit accounts. The evidence of cannibalism, though abhorrent to Victorian sensibilities, was undeniable in the state of the remains found. The Franklin expedition had ended not in glorious discovery, but in starvation, disease, madness, and the ultimate act of desperation on a frozen, God-forsaken island. Act 4. Decades of questions, lead, botulism, and bad luck. McClintock's discoveries answered the question of what happened to the Franklin expedition, but they opened up a host of new, more complex questions. Why did it happen? How could the best-equipped expedition in history, led by experienced officers and carrying 3 years' worth of food, meet such a catastrophic end? For over a century, The blame was often placed on Franklin himself for poor decision-making, or simply on the unpredictable, overwhelming power of the Arctic environment. But in the 1980s, modern science began to offer a new, more sinister explanation. A Canadian forensic anthropologist named Owen Beatty led a series of expeditions to King William Island. He exhumed the remarkably well-preserved bodies of the 3 sailors buried on Beechey Island and analyzed bone fragments from skeletons found by McClintock. Beatty's findings were shocking. The tissues and bones of the crew members showed incredibly high levels of lead. Where could this lead have come from? Suspicion immediately fell upon the expedition's vast supply of tinned food. The 8,000 tins provided to the ships were sealed with lead solder, a common practice at the time. However, due to the rushed nature of the contract, it appeared the tins supplied to Franklin were poorly made, with thick seams of lead solder sloppily applied on the inside of the cans, where it could leach directly into the food. The lead poisoning theory provided a compelling explanation for the disaster. Chronic lead poisoning would have caused severe physical and neurological damage, fatigue, weakness, paranoia, cognitive impairment, and eventually, madness and death. This could explain why 3 men died in the first, seemingly easy winter. It could explain why Franklin might have made poor navigational choices. And it could explain the baffling decision by Crozier and the survivors to abandon their ships that likely still contained food and shelter, and attempt an impossible overland march, dragging heavy, useless objects with them. Perhaps their minds were so addled by lead that they were no longer capable of rational thought. However, the lead poisoning theory, while popular, is not universally accepted. Subsequent studies have shown that lead levels in 19th century Britain were generally high, and the levels found in the Franklin crew, while elevated, might not have been acutely fatal on their own. Other factors were likely at play. Scurvy, the debilitating disease caused by vitamin C deficiency, was almost certainly a factor, especially after the men abandoned the ships and their stored lime juice. Botulism, from improperly sealed food tins, could also have contributed to the initial deaths and illness. And starvation and exposure were the ultimate killers for those who embarked on the doomed march south. Recent analysis of the ship's likely route and the ice conditions in those specific years also suggests that Franklin was simply incredibly unlucky. He appears to have sailed into a part of the Arctic archipelago that was entering a period of unusually severe cold, trapping his ships in thick, multi-year ice from which there was no escape. The disaster was likely not caused by a single factor, but by a cascade of misfortunes: bad luck with the ice, possible deficiencies in their tinned provisions, lead, botulism, or simply spoilage, the onset of scurvy, and perhaps fatally poor decisions made by leaders whose judgment may have been impaired. The Franklin expedition wasn't just a failure of technology. It was a perfect storm of environmental hostility and human vulnerability. Act 5. Ghosts in the Deep. For over 160 years, the final resting places of HMS Erebus and HMS Terror remained one of the Arctic's greatest unsolved mysteries. Countless search expeditions had failed to find them. The Inuit accounts provided clues, but the shifting ice and vast search area made locating the wrecks seem impossible. Then, in the 21st century, the search was renewed, driven by a combination of Canadian national pride, advancements in underwater technology, and a crucial respect for traditional Inuit knowledge. In 2008, the Canadian government made finding the Franklin ships a national priority. Parks Canada, armed with state-of-the-art side-scan sonar and remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, began systematically surveying the waters around King William Island, focusing on areas identified in Inuit oral history. For years, the search was frustrating. Then, in September 2014, a breakthrough. A Parks Canada survey team, Acting on a recent account from an Inuit historian who recalled his grandfather seeing a mass sticking out of the ice decades earlier, diverted their search to a previously unexplored area in the Queen Maud Gulf, south of King William Island. Their sonar picked up an anomaly on the seabed. An ROV was deployed. The images sent back were breathtaking. Resting upright on the seafloor, in just 11 meters, 36 feet, of icy water, was the remarkably well-preserved wreck of HS Erebus. The discovery made headlines around the world. It was a stunning vindication of Inuit oral history and a monumental archaeological find. The cold Arctic water had preserved the ship in incredible detail. Underwater archaeologists began the meticulous process of exploring and documenting the wreck. They found artifacts scattered on the deck and seabed, cannons, the ship's bell, ceramic plates, even personal items belonging to the crew. But one ship was still missing. Where was HMS Terror? 2 years later, in September 2016, the mystery was finally solved, again thanks to Inuit knowledge. The Arctic Research Foundation, a private group assisting Parks Canada, was acting on a tip from Sammy Kogvik, an Inuit Canadian ranger. Kogvik recalled seeing a large piece of wood, resembling a mast, sticking out of the ice in a place called Terror Bay many years earlier. The search team navigated their vessel, the Martin Bergman, into the uncharted waters of Terror Bay. Their sonar immediately detected a large object on the seabed. When the ROV descended, the images were even more astonishing than those of Erebus. There, resting perfectly upright in about 24 meters, 79 feet, of water, was HMS Terror. The ship was in an even more pristine state of preservation than Erebus. Windows were still intact, the ship's wheel was in place, and even the ropes and rigging were partially preserved. Inside, through the windows, archaeologists could see plates stacked on shelves, beds intact, and scientific instruments stored as if waiting for the crew to return. It was like a ghost ship, a perfectly preserved time capsule from 1848. The discoveries of Erebus and Terror have opened a new chapter in the Franklin saga. The wrecks are now protected National Historic Sites, and ongoing archaeological work promises to reveal unprecedented details about the lives and deaths of the crew. Artifacts brought to the surface offer poignant glimpses into their final days. The locations of the wrecks also provide crucial clues. Erebus, found further south, suggests some crew members may have remanned the ship after abandoning it, attempting to sail south before finally succumbing. Terror, found in a sheltered bay further north, perfectly preserved, raises questions about why it was left in such good condition. While the discovery of the ships provides a sense of closure, many questions remain. What exactly caused the initial deaths on Beechy Island? What was Franklin's exact route after leaving Beechy Island? What specific series of events led to the decision to abandon the ships? And crucially, where is the final resting place of Sir John Franklin himself? His body was never identified among the remains found on King William Island. Does he lie in an undiscovered grave on land, or is he entombed within one of the ghost ships resting silently in the deep? The Franklin expedition remains a powerful and haunting tale. It is a story of ambition and folly, of unimaginable suffering and extraordinary endurance. It is a testament to the brutal power of the Arctic and a sobering reminder of the limits of human technology in the face of nature's fury. The ghosts of Erebus and Terror have finally been found, but their secrets are still slowly, painstakingly being brought to light from the icy depths.